Hi, I'm Sheila and welcome to Conversations Over Coffee by Coffee Morning Laughter. Today we have Debrae joining us, who's going to go into the details of how it is to live with mental health challenges. Please stay tuned so you can hear her journey and hear her story as we delve deeper with Conversations Over Coffee. Hi Debrae, welcome to Conversations Over Coffee by CML. You're our third guest and today you're here to talk about mental health and dealing with it. I know you're a keen listener of the podcast and you've actually experienced a level of mental health challenges. Now, thank you so much for coming on to Conversations Over Coffee, where we'll go deeper into some of the topics that we've discussed on the podcast. Now, Deborah, just tell us more about yourself and who you are.
Thank you firstly for having me. My name is Deborah or Debrae, which is a nickname, and I'm 27 years old. And my journey with mental health started a few years back, but was actually diagnosed in 2019. And since then, I've been trying to navigate a world with depression and just finding my way through the diagnosis and dealing with day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to come on to that as part of the topic because one of the things that we do so well I hope so, at Coffee Morning Laughter, is we discuss mental health challenges quite light-heartedly, but raising awareness of the daily challenges and the impacts this have. Now, it's interesting that you've come on to Conversations Over Coffee to talk to us about your daily challenges because you was diagnosed quite young. Before you had your diagnosis or you thought you had mental health challenges, what was it like before? What was the actions around it?
I would say there wasn't much awareness before. There wasn't much knowledge from my side on mental health in general. Growing up, I went through a lot, so I experienced abuse. There was not much knowledge from my side about mental health in general. I experienced abuse growing up, and looking back now, there were symptoms of depression, there were symptoms of mental illness, but because I didn't have that awareness, I didn't know it was depression at the time. Looking back at my behaviours, acting out, wanting attention, wanting my mum constantly. Looking back now, I could see that there were elements of the illness, but it hadn't been diagnosed.
Okay, can I just ask you a question? Because obviously, you're from a Black African background. Do you think the lack of awareness was a culture thing? Because what I have heard before is that sometimes in the black community, we don't really talk about depression, we don't really accept it. Now, I'm not sure if you're religious or not, because sometimes that hinders people from actually being open about potential mental health challenges. Now, when you were displaying symptoms, what was your characteristics like? What do they look like?
So you did touch on a few things, including culture, religion, and I would firstly addressing the culture aspect. So I'm Nigerian, and I wouldn't say that was the reason that I didn't have awareness. I just think back then, so I was born in 1994, and there wasn't much discussion, as much discussion as there is nowadays.
Of course.
Because nowadays social media is rampant, with information, with people's experiences, that we didn't have that much access to technology, and we didn't have that much information about mental health. Back then it was, because I grew up in the 90s, so back then if anybody showed anything that was considered abnormal or different, you'll be labelled crazy, or I don't think anyone had the resources that we do now, and I think that's where the lack of awareness actually stems from.
I think, interestingly enough, you say that people will label you crazy. I remember, because in the 90s when you was born, I had already been living. Now I remember when people wouldn't use mental health as a positive term. It's you're mental, and it was a negative connotation to it. So I think when obviously you started to experience mental health challenges, it might have not been identified as what it is today. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, How was it for you in your household, working with that and living with that? Because obviously, you know, if you're telling me that in 1994, when you was born and you was growing up in the 90s, it wasn't popular or it wasn't something that was discussed openly, how did your parents and your family members treat you?
Again, I didn't have a diagnosis at this point. To them, I was just Debbie, 5-year-old Debbie, just acting out. The abuse that I experienced was actually from a step parent. So again, it was, you know, times where my mum wouldn't be at home. So she didn't really, my mum used to work a lot, so she didn't really notice any change. It's only when maybe I would act up at school and they would call her in a few times. And, you know, she just thought it's just kids being kids, just kids being naughty. And back to the question that you asked about, you know, religion as well and culture, I would say my religion didn't hold, so I'm a Christian, but I didn't allow that to hold me back from sharing my experiences and talking openly about my struggles with mental health, just because I believe in being authentic and transparent and showing that, you know, Christians go through things just as much as the next person. And because there's that label, sometimes you are pressured to appear perfect. You're pressured to appear that, you know, God's got everything under control or your life is completely under control. But I like to show, I guess, vulnerability and walk in my truth.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned labels. Because I was educated a few weeks back when you spoke to me about your journey and your challenges. So when you mention labels, I go into a thought process of saying, what were your fears about being labelled? Because there's different labels, isn't there? And some people don't want to be labelled, and some people don't mind calling out their mental health illness. Because it's not mental health, it's mental illness. Explain that to us and our listeners, really.
So I've heard the term, you know, she experiences mental health or she has mental health, and the reality of it is that everybody has mental health, and it's on a spectrum. So it ranges from good mental health to poor mental health, and I would describe my the place I fall on that spectrum was poor mental health with my diagnosis. But with managing it, you can, you know, be on the spectrum towards good mental health. So the term, when people use that phrase or term, it's not actually correct.
So bringing you to that, you know, poor mental health and the good mental health, on that scale, where's the worst place that you have been in terms of your mental health?
Literally on the worst end of poor mental health. I guess we'll touch on it later on in the interview, but
you can go for it now, actually.
So in 2013, I had my first episode of Psychosis, which was all trauma related, trauma-induced psychosis. So I was manic. You may have seen some of the celebrities like Britney Spears, you know, when she had the infamous shaving her head incident. Kanye West, when he went on, you know, several rounds on social media, and the character, I don't know if anyone still watches EastEnders, I do. There's a character called Stacey. She suffers with bipolar.
Right, Stacey Brannigan.
Stacey Slater. Stacey Slater, and yes, she has an episode where it actually documented her episode. So we call it mania, hypermania. So you're in a state of delusion, you're having hallucinations, you're, you know, thinking that people are out to get you, and you believe your own delusions. It's terrifying. Some people experience, you know, hypersexual behavior. Their inhibition is completely gone. So it's a terrifying experience. I suffered that at 19 years old.
How did that impact your relationships around you? Because I can imagine you was battling with what you knew before and what was real and what isn't real. How did that impact your relationships? And what I really want to understand was your feelings in that situation and the feelings of the people around you.
So it started as the main trigger was a breakup of a significant relationship, and that coupled with the trauma that I had experienced, it just all got too much. And let's say the breakup happened in March 2013. I still remember the dates, and I stopped eating was the first symptom. I stopped eating, which is very out of character for me. And I would just lay in bed. I was at university at the time. I wouldn't go to lectures, and I was fine, normal. And then when I got back to my maternal home, I was very anxious. I wouldn't go to sleep. And remember, bearing in mind I was 19 at the time, you know, I would beg my mum to actually, you know, can you just stay with me because I'm terrified and I can't sleep, just very anxious. And then the mania just came on suddenly. I was very erratic. I was replaying a lot of things from my childhood. I would say very, you know, absurd things. I believed absurd things. I believed that, you know, I was being, so like the news would come on and I would believe that they were talking directly to me. Messages were being directed at me. The world was going to end. And my mum at the time, this was the first time this had ever happened to me. And like I mentioned before, we didn't have any, you know, inkling or much awareness about ill mental health. So she knew instantly, because my mum works in the social care sector. So she knew instantly. She said to me, whatever's going on, if we're not careful, you know, they will lock you up or they'll put you in hospital. And at the time, I was thinking, what on earth does that mean? I'd never come into contact with a mental health facility at all. I didn't, you know, again, I didn't have any awareness of that sort of world. And I was actually sectioned in 2013 and I was in a mental health facility for 4 months. And the support and care that I saw from my mother was unmatched. She was in the hospital every single day. I'm the oldest of 3, so my younger siblings were kept away from this part of my journey, just because my mum didn't think it was beneficial for them to see their older sister in that state. In the hospital, it was terrifying. I had to be secluded because I was so erratic that I posed a threat to myself, you know, and I was under constant surveillance.
Were you suicidal?
At the time, because I was more in a manic state, I wasn't really suicidal. I was just very tearful, you know, replaying things of the past. So, for example, the doctor could be talking to me about something completely unrelated and I'll just blurt out something from my past, something from my past relationship. But the people that knew, my auntie and my mum, they were just so present. They're every day cooperating with doctors. My mum did a lot of research, which I commend her for, especially coming from a Nigerian household. People are quick to brush things under the carpet.
That's right.
To want to hide the illness, just say, you know, it's witchcraft, this will go away. You just need to pray about it. My mum was prayerful and proactive.
Okay, so there's 2 P's. Yeah, prayerful and proactive,
And she did her research. She was liaising with doctors, you know, in the mental health facilities. If you don't have a strong support system, if you don't have good family, good friends to help you through that phase, you're going to be in a revolving door in and out of the hospital
all the time.
And I feel like if it wasn't for them and their support and their guidance, the doctors as well, I would have been in there much longer than needed.
I mean, you was in there for 4 months. What was it like going back to the real world? How long did it take you to take those steps back into the world? Because I know sometimes when you've gone through such a I don't even know what word to use here. You've gone through such a challenging moment or such a big experience that changes you. You're wary of everything. So how was it for you to step back into the world after you came out of the hospital? What was your first thing?
So I think that was actually harder than being in hospital, and many people will be surprised to hear that, because my whole life changed from my weight to my whole identity. And at this time, they actually hadn't diagnosed it. They had misdiagnosed me.
What was the first diagnosis they gave you?
Depression.
Right.
So they just said, it was just depression, just a bad episode of depression. And after that, I had to take a year out of university. So I was actually studying in Birmingham.
What were you studying?
Psychology, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And this episode actually happened at the end of first year. So I missed out on second year. I was advised by lecturers and doctors to take at least a year out. Even more time, to be honest, because what had actually happened is when you have a manic episode, the chemicals in your brain actually change. So the levels of serotonin and the levels of dopamine, they become unbalanced. And it's a lot for your body to go through. Can you imagine, the chemicals in your brain changing? I had to have surgery called ECT, which is where they place electrodes on your temple. They put you to sleep, and they basically send electric currents through your brain to kind of shock you back into normality. And I had about 6 sessions of that.
Wow.
So you can imagine, it's your body going through trauma. You're already,
your mind, your body, all of you.
It's so much to take in. So looking back now, in hindsight, I would have maybe taken some more time, definitely, because my support system was all in London. My doctors were in London, my health team was in London, and I was away in the Midlands, studying. But I, being the person I am, I was like, I don't want to be behind. All my friends are going to be graduating before me, blah, blah, blah. There were just so many things that I was, I put before my health. And I was just so eager to get back. So I took the year out, which was fine. I was put on medication, which brought with it a lot of side effects like slurred speech, lactation, weight gain. And but I was still okay, I was still managing. So it came time to come back to university, and that's what hit me the hardest, because I had residual symptoms, but being at home, being in London, I was under supervision, so I could deal with it. So when I went back to university, I struggled immensely. I wasn't going to lectures. I would just lay in bed.
Back in the same routine then, from when you first got diagnosed.
And even talking about it now, it's like that was the same environment that I had the breakup in, and I was so low in. So to go back to that,
they normally say you don't go back to the place where you experienced the trauma. I don't know if that's correct.
There's a saying, it's a bit cliche, but you can't heal in the same place that broke you, or where you actually experienced the hurt, the pain. And it was in that same room that I went. Uni accommodation is very,
I don't know why I didn't stay in accommodation.
Oh, okay.
So, but I can only imagine. I mean, just to bring it back to focus here. So you had some support around you. What I've actually really taken from you is you understood what you was going through. It seems like you have a very good awareness of what you've been through. What would you say to people that are listening who are watching this interview? What would be the tips that you would give them on how to... Oh, I know you've said to us already that every day is a challenge and you constantly have to push yourself to do certain things. But what would you say to the listeners or people that are around, people that are listening now who are going through what you've been through? Because what I picked up from you was the support around you in terms of your family and your friends. And what I've picked up from this conversation literally is that you understand what you was faced with. I don't know if you understood it in the time you was going through it, but it's like you've educated yourself around it. What advice are you giving to people out there?
Only now do I understand, because going through it, I had no clue, hence why I ended up the way I did. And just to give people a clearer picture, just to finish off your last question, I just want to give people like a clear idea, because you asked, I think you asked, you know, how did it change my life? So before I go into the tips, just to give people a better idea, when I did go back to university, again, I told you that I fell into a deep depression. So all I would do was literally sleep. And the medication increases your appetite, so I was eating a lot. And within a few months, I had gone from my normal size to about 3 dress sizes. And for me, that was like a loss of my identity. It was a loss of my confidence. That depressed me even further. So all in all, I failed that year. And that was the beginning of me constantly failing university. I had to go back to London, so I actually was allowed to transfer to a London university. And I went on to fail university that second year about 2 more times, so a total of 3 times. It was always my dream to become a psychologist, but because, you know, failing that many times, I just thought, this isn't for me, I can't do it. I've never been challenged so much, and I just want to call it quits. But my mum kept on encouraging me. That's when I joined our church, and they were phenomenal. Our cluster was phenomenal. And I finally graduated. So I started university in 2012, and then I graduated in 2019 with the 2-1, and I was so pleased. But it was a real battle, and in those years I didn't go out. I was a recluse. I was heavily depressed, suicidal. Literally my comfort was, you know, eating. And again, when you're eating so much and doing so little, you're bound to gain weight. You know, coming from a Nigerian background, the aunties that didn't really know what was going on, going out, I became very anxious because they would always have a lot to say about my appearance. Now, you know, why I was still in university. It was just a lot to deal with. But the tips that I would say helped me through, again, was the phenomenal support from family, friends. I did share my testimony after I graduated, and it actually went viral, and I was very, very surprised that I wasn't met with judgment, but you know, strangers congratulating me, opening up they would DM me about their own experiences, and just having that support.
I think sometimes when you say that, sometimes it's the fear of what will people say, how will people perceive me. And when you overcome that, you understand that the world is not so cruel. Because I think that's what people fear the most of. If I tell my story, if people really know what's going on with me, how will they treat me and how will they respond to me? And you've just said you had good response from everywhere. I'm going to come on to a part that I know about you, that you started blogging at that time, right? What did that do for you?
It was such an outlet for me. I started, so at the time, while in the midst of all this going on, I actually was in a very toxic relationship, which was due to, you know, my low confidence, my now low self-esteem, just feeling like I was worth nothing because of the diagnosis, and this went on for years. And the only way I could really, you know, find an outlet was through writing. So I'd always been a gifted writer, excelled in English at school, and I, you know, wrote about my experiences from my breakup to the toxic relationship. And again, the response from women, especially even men, saying that, you know, your work has inspired me to become better. Your work, you know, I got a comment from a guy in America that told me that, you know, he can now see why he damages every woman that he runs into. And I just thought, wow, like, not only was this an outlet for me, but people can relate. And I feel like in this life, you know, the human experience is met with so many challenges and obstacles, and people like to plaster, you know, over it. And I think just having someone that you can relate to and know that, you know, they go through things too. I'm not alone. Really helped. So that was the beginning of my blog.
which led to a book, I believe. Yeah? Now, Metamorhosis. Tell us a little bit about that before we go off here.
So Metamorphosis.
I've read it, by the way, so
Okay.
yeah, so I know about it. I've read it and I've got it on my Kindle. So yeah, just know that I bought it.
So Metamorphosis is the process in which a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, and the process in which that happens. And I think that was very symbolic of my journey. Although I'm not there where I want to be yet, I've come such a long way, and the growth, especially internally, mirrored that of the process of metamorphosis. And I just wanted to give it a name that shows my evolution throughout this process. So the book is split into 3 parts. If I remember correctly.
Have it here.
Cocoon, caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly. And it starts with me in this toxic relationship and dealing with my internal battles, my mental battles, and then to the middle, which is me starting to have an awareness of, I deserve better than this, just reevaluating my life, my decisions, and then it moves on to where I'm at now and ends with a poem called Roulette. So the book is actually a collection of poetry that helped me capture my, innermost thoughts and feelings and emotions. And Roulette, actually, you don't really know how that ends, in a sense of you're free to make your assumptions, you're free to make your predictions, but you don't know how life is going to turn out for me. And you just have to stay tuned to see what happens next.
Deborah, I don't know if I've got everything out on this one sitting in, but if we haven't, we'll have to call you back and do another conversation over coffee, because I think your journey excels anything that I've ever experienced. There are a lot of listeners out there that will be able to relate to what you've been through. And thank you so much for coming on to Conversations Over Coffee. I don't know if you felt like you've got enough out there, but if you haven't, you're more than welcome to come back, But this has been Conversations Over Coffee with Debrae Ojelade. Have I got that right? Yeah. And I'm just going to hold this book up because it's out. It's available on Amazon and Kindle and paperback. So pick up a copy if you haven't got one. Debrae, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and please come back.
Thank you, Sheila.